The US loves to flex its wealth, but just past the highway billboards and stadium lights are towns where power flickers, roads collapse, and tap water might give you a parasite. These aren't edge cases. This is what happens when entire zip codes are left off the progress map. No jobs, no safety net, no headlines. Just silence. And a $13,000 house no one wants. Today, we're going into the forgotten back roads of America, where the poverty looks post-apocalyptic and the real estate comes with a side of heartbreak. This isn't surface level. What they missed, you'll already know. By the end, you'll see things differently and wish you'd known this sooner. One town had hookworm cases in 2023. Another has 38 residents, no stores, and 0 functioning sewers. Think you know the worst towns in America? Let's test that theory. One of these places still gets FEMA letters addressed to current resident. And trust me, you're not ready for what's next. Choosing wrong could cost you thousands, or your sanity. Wait until you hear what's happening in Gloucester, Mississippi, if you've ever heard of it. Want to make smarter decisions? Or at least less disastrous ones? Number 5. Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Johnstown has survived 3 floods, 1 factory exodus, and a tourism economy built on trauma. And somehow it's still standing. Barely, but standing. Welcome to Johnstown, Pennsylvania, where the American dream got waterlogged in 1889, gentrification missed the memo, and homes now sell for less than a used snowblower. What's really going on in Johnstown? Let's cut through the sentimentality. Yes, the city survived disasters, but the slowest, cruelest disaster? Neglect. The stats tell the story. Median home price? Around $22,000, with many listings dipping under $15,000. Population loss? From 60,000 plus in the 1950s to just over 18,000 today. Poverty rate? Over 35%, with child poverty around 40%. Unemployment? Frequently higher than national average with limited job growth. Crime rate? Lower than Pine Bluff, but still higher than the national average, particularly property crimes. The steel industry collapse hit Johnstown like a wrecking ball made of pink slips. The city never really recovered. What's left now feels like a museum to loss. Beautiful hills, rusted bridges, an eerie quiet that feels cinematic, but not in a fun way. Let's talk about how Johnstown keeps getting left out of the fix-it list. After the infamous 1889 flood, which killed over 2,000 people, the city became a national symbol for rebuilding. Fast forward a century, and Johnstown's flooding is still an issue. But now the water comes slower, and so does the help. Federal aid? Piecemeal. State investment? Sporadic. Economic planning? Mostly PowerPoints and press conferences. Johnstown is part of the Appalachian Regional Commission, a government program designed to boost struggling regions. It sounds great, until you realize most of the ARC's funding ends up in politically shinier spots. The kind of towns with Instagrammable main streets and fewer collapsing bridges. Meanwhile, Johnstown gets stuck with Band-Aid grants and pilot programs that rarely scale. What it actually feels like to live there. Living in Johnstown is like dating someone who's still not over their ex. The steel boom. You hear about it constantly. How great it used to be. How everyone used to have jobs. How the downtown used to have stores. Now, it's thrift shops, dollar stores, and empty buildings with real estate signs that look sun-faded enough to be artifacts. Reddit quote from a local: "We don't lock our doors. Not because it's safe, but because nobody wants to steal your 2002 Ford Taurus anyway." You know things are rough when your town's biggest tourist attraction is a museum about how everything got wiped out. Okay, and why is it always gray? Like, who dimmed the sunlight in western Pennsylvania? I'm convinced Johnstown has a deal with the clouds. It's not just overcast, it's existentially overcast. Like, even the sky is thinking, yeah, not today. You want seasonal depression in July? Come through. Picture standing on a bridge at dusk. The air is still, the water's high. You hear the faint echo of a train, but no city noise. The buildings around you? Mostly empty. You feel like you're walking through history, because you kind of are, but history's not paying the bills. San Diego gets sunshine and biotech. Johnstown gets flooding and nostalgia. Guess which one gets infrastructure funding? You just sat through flood metaphors and Rust Belt sarcasm. You earned that like, or at least a pity click. If you ever wake up thinking, maybe I could move to a $12,000 house in rural America, you'll want me here to talk you out of it, or at least roast the foundation. Number 4. Marianna, Arkansas. Marianna, Arkansas is the kind of place where even the soul food gave up. A town once famous for barbecue that made national best of lists now has more boarded buildings than working stoplights. Yes, really. What's really happening in Marianna? Tucked deep in the Arkansas Delta, Marianna has a quiet southern charm and an economic crisis no one wants to talk about. Let's hit you with the numbers that matter. Median home price, $17,000 to $23,000. That's not affordable. That's an SOS. Poverty rate, over 45%, one of the highest in the nation. Median household income, around $22,000, less than half the US average. Unemployment, hovering around double the national rate. Crime, moderate compared to some others on this list, but theft and property crime are common. It's the kind of place where opportunity didn't just leave, it shut off the lights, took the BBQ, and didn't even bother to lie about coming back. You know it's bad when the best thing to do in town is drive somewhere else, delivered with a smile, but it stings. You can buy a house in Marianna for less than the price of an iPhone. But good luck getting cell service to use it. Marianna isn't just broke, it's structurally abandoned. Here's what we mean. Arkansas ranks near the bottom in public health, education funding, and infrastructure investment. That's not just bad luck, that's budget choices stacked over decades. Federal attention? Barely. State support? Mostly performative. Even revitalization zones skip over places like Marianna in favor of towns closer to highways or political donor bases. And let's not forget, this is the seat of Lee County, which ranks as one of the poorest counties in the entire US and has been for decades. One of the only notable investments? Prison jobs. Because in places like Marianna, incarceration often gets more attention than education. The emotional price of living cheap. Yes, you can buy a house here for under $20,000. But what are you buying into? Broken roads, aging infrastructure, grocery stores that carry more soda than produce, an economy running on fumes and faith. You're not just moving into a house, you're moving into a place that the system quietly decided wasn't worth saving, but didn't bother to tell the people still living there. Let's talk about the mosquitoes. Delta, Arkansas in the summer? It's a blood sport. You're not enjoying the porch, you're part of the buffet. Add 95-degree heat, constant humidity, and power grids that weren't built for modern AC units, and suddenly that cheap house starts to feel like a steamy trap box from a Saw movie, only with fewer amenities. It's wild that one of the poorest towns in America used to serve some of the best barbecue in the South, and now can't even keep a diner open. If a house is listed at $13,000 but the nearest hospital is an hour away, would you buy it? Yes? No? Only if it comes with ghost-free walls and working plumbing. Drop your delusions or dreams in the comments. We're judging either way. Number 3. Allenville, Missouri. Allenville doesn't have a downtown because the town literally got flooded out and never got put back together. Yes, you heard that right. This place is basically America's smallest official ghost town with a zip code, and it's still on the census. If you're scoring at home, population, approximately 38 people. That's not a typo, that's a bowling league. What reality looks like in Allenville? Allenville is the kind of place where the term living conditions feels like a conspiracy theory. Let's run the numbers, because weird towns deserve clear facts. Population, roughly 38 residents, fewer people than a high school marching band. Median home price, some homes list for under $6,000. Yes, $6,000. Infrastructure, no sewer system, limited electricity, roads you question touching with a rental car. Businesses, imagine a ghost town, then take away the museum and add real mail delivery. Employment, local jobs, practically ceremonial. Allenville doesn't decline slowly, it shrinks like a wool sweater in a hot dryer. You know it's economically dead when the realtor's selling loneliness as cozy living. Gov thing on thing, when help never arrives. Here's where it gets really dark. Allenville's decline isn't from lack of beauty, it's from lack of attention. Flooding here isn't a one-off headline, it's recurrent. Repeated inundations from nearby waterways have rendered basic infrastructure unreliable. But guess what doesn't show up after the floodwaters recede? Consistent federal or state investment. Local officials have petitioned for mitigation funds. They've applied for grants. They've tried levees and drainage plans. But larger towns nearby, with bigger tax bases and louder state reps, always get priority. Allenville? It gets evaporation. Want a town where FEMA mail doesn't even land anymore? Here it is. It's easy to quote the $6,000 homes and call it cheap, but cheap doesn't cover. No consistent sewer. Electricity that blinks out like a tired Christmas tree. Roads that make potholes look aspirational. Cheap here isn't freedom, it's abandonment dressed as opportunity. Allenville's real estate USP? Great price, limited earthly attachments. Let's talk about the mosquitoes. These aren't regular mosquitoes, these are Allenville mosquitoes with PhDs in annoyance. They don't just bite, they take names. You walk outside and it's like you've entered an Audrey Hepburn movie titled Breakfast at Spleen. And the only soundtrack is their buzzing, because there are no bars, no nightlife. Just your arm getting bitten like it's auditioning for a horror film. Picture stepping outside. The river's low, birds chirping, wind rustling the trees. 20 steps down the road and crickets. Literal crickets. You breathe in fresh air, then realize the nearest grocery store is a tractor ride away. Silence isn't peaceful. It's the absence of everything except yourself. It's strange. A town with fewer people than some classrooms has more land than opportunities. Meanwhile, big cities with all the jobs and broadband still choose canned coffee over community. Number 2. Whitehall, Alabama. Whitehall's sewer problem is so notorious that doctors once linked it to hookworm cases. In 2023, yeah, hookworm. Like it's 1903 and someone forgot to tell the CDC. This place isn't quirky rural. It's where infrastructure poverty went from metaphor to biology. Whitehall sits in rural Alabama, but don't let the pine forest fool you. This isn't quiet country living. The numbers are stark. Median home price, around $19,800. Sometimes lower. Poverty rate, near 40%, with a county rate even higher. Unemployment, often above the state and national averages. Hookworm outbreaks, confirmed cases in recent years tied to poor sanitation. Access to healthcare, sparse clinics, limited specialists, long travel times. This isn't cheap real estate opportunity, it's the price tag on neglect. If charm were infrastructure, Whitehall would be a megacity. Here's the ugly truth. Whitehall's sanitation crisis isn't accidental, it's structural. State and federal funds exist for rural infrastructure improvement, grants, loans, emergency relief, but rarely reach towns where every application letter bounces against low tax bases and low political clout. Whitehall's been in reports, academic papers, health journals, hazard assessments, while the toilets still back up and the roads stay spotty. Documentation does not equal intervention. That's the twist nobody tells you. Some officials call it persistent rural poverty, others call it forgotten, locals call it Thursday. Cheap homes here aren't a bargain, they're a liability discount. Sure, you can snag a 3-bedroom for the price of a used TV, but add in septic that fails, water you're not sure about, and a job market that asks, "Why are you here?" every Monday, suddenly that price looks like a participation trophy. Okay, let's talk about Walmart parking lot sociology. In Whitehall, that's your social center. You go there not to shop, but to compare cars with people you see every day. It's like a low-budget symposium on life choices. Everyone's in a pickup older than my humor algorithm. And don't get me started on the ice cream truck that shows up once a month like it's royalty. It's wild that in one American town, you're worried about coyotes at night, and in another, you're worried about what's in the water during the day. Would you buy a $19,000 house if it meant possibly encountering 1900-level sanitation issues in 2025? Absolutely! Only if utilities were included. Nope, thanks. Drop your vote in the comments. Honesty encouraged, skepticism mandatory. Number 1. Gloucester, Mississippi. If America keeps pretending places like this don't exist, Gloucester is the future. Just quieter, cheaper, and easier to ignore. Welcome to number 1. Not because it's the worst in every category, but because it's the clearest example of how neglect actually works. Gloucester isn't dramatic. It's not loud. It doesn't riot, trend, or tweet. It just fades. Gloucester is a small town in southwest Mississippi, tucked near the Louisiana border. Once a timber town, then the mills closed. And when the mills left, so did the reason for being here. Here's the reality, no spin. Population around 850, down steadily for decades. Median home price, roughly $13,000 to $18,000. Some houses sell for less than a used lawn tractor. Poverty rate, close to 50%. Every other person. Job market, almost non-existent. Few local local employers beyond gas stations, dollar stores, and prisons nearby. Access to services. No grocery store, no pharmacy, no dentist. Healthcare means driving. Gloucester isn't unsafe in a chaotic way. It's unsafe in a structural way. If something goes wrong, health, money, weather, there's no backup plan. There's just distance. You don't worry about traffic in Gloucester. You worry about whether the town still counts as a destination. Mississippi ranks near the bottom nationally in health outcomes, income, education funding, and infrastructure investment. That's the baseline. Now zoom into a rural, majority black town with a shrinking tax base. Gloucester doesn't lose funding. It never had it. Federal programs technically exist for rural development, but they're competitive, paperwork heavy, and often favor towns with grant writers, matching funds, and political leverage. Gloucester has none of that. Instead, the most consistent investment nearby? Correctional facilities. Not schools, not clinics, not broadband. When incarceration becomes the region's economic anchor, you're not building a future, you're managing decline. On paper, Gloucester looks like a bargain. Dirt cheap houses, no traffic, quiet nights. But cheap living here means long drives for basic needs, limited emergency care, few jobs, fewer exits, and the constant math of, can I afford to stay if nothing improves? A local once said, "We don't leave because we hate it. We leave because there's nothing to grow into." That's the whole story right there. Also, Mississippi humidity deserves jail time. You step outside and the air just wraps around you like it's trying to keep you from escaping. Your shirt gives up immediately. Combine that with old houses, shaky AC, and power bills that spike like they're mad at you personally, and suddenly that $14,000 house starts charging you interest in sweat.